right before Rosh Hashanah begins, I get the information that Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the longtime Supreme Court justice, first appointed in 1993, famous feminist voice, has passed away. And in Judaism, the first thing you always say is Baruch Dayan Emet, blessed is the true judge. So we say that obviously because death comes to us all, whether we are, on the side of the righteous or whether we are not on the side of the righteous. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, for all of our disagreements, and we had many of them, obviously, I disagree with her politics thoroughly and profoundly. She devoted decades of her life to public service. She was responsible for some things that I think everyone can agree with, including the forwarding of women's rights in the workplace. A lot of those things are very good. And her passage should be met with national mourning, of course. This, of course, however, raises the greatest, I think, constitutional crisis that I've seen in modern American history. Not because of what the Republicans are going to do, fill the seat, but because of what Democrats are threatening to do. Now, let's be real about this. From the very beginning, Ruth Bader Ginsburg should have stepped down when Barack Obama was president. Now, apparently her dying wish was that her seat not be filled. And Democrats are making a big deal out of this. There is no constitutional provision that allows a justice, as their dying wish, to pick their successor. In communist countries, judges pick their successors. That is not what happens in a free republic. In a free republic, however the process works is how the process works. Imagine if Justice Antonin Scalia had left a note by his bedside table before he had a heart attack and died, saying, "My dying wish is that the Supreme Court overturn Roe versus Wade." Do you think there would have been 5 seconds of consideration over his dying wish? That is not how this works. You do not get to will your Supreme Court seat to somebody else because it is not, in fact, your Supreme Court seat. It is a seat that pre-exists you and will exist long after you. Just as Donald Trump doesn't get to will the presidency of the United States to whoever he wants to be his successor, RBG does not get to will her seat to anybody else. So her dying wish is of absolutely no constitutional value. We all know this, by the way. I mean, she was holding on tenaciously to that Supreme Court seat. She didn't want to step down because she didn't want Trump to fill the seat. And it's patently obvious that the reason that she didn't step down earlier is because she thought Hillary Clinton was going to win. Okay, she should have stepped down in 2010. Remember, she was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer back in 2009. She was 87 years old when she died. So that means she was 76 years old when she was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Now, typically, pancreatic cancer, unfortunately, has a very high kill rate. And she stayed on the court for another 11 years after her original diagnosis with pancreatic cancer. Again, when Barack Obama was president, she could have stepped down any time in there. And she didn't step down in 2016 because she figured that she was going to be on the court while Hillary Clinton was president. Bill Clinton has said as much, right? Bill Clinton was asked by Margaret Brennan about this. Margaret Brennan said Ginsburg reportedly told her friends she had intended to retire under what she had expected to be a Hillary Clinton presidency. Did you ever talk to her about that? Do you know who she envisioned taking her place? And Clinton said, no, I mean, I hoped Hillary would be elected in 2016. I thought she would and hoped she'd have some time because she wanted to leave the court while she was still at full steam. She wanted to leave the court with someone who she thought was not an ideologue, someone who was too far to the right, but I don't think she necessarily had a preferred candidate. I think she trusted Hillary to make a good decision. It was perfectly obvious that she was sticking around because she thought Hillary was going to win. Then Trump won, and then it became basically a race against the clock for Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And you could see this in the way that the Democratic Party infrastructure mobilized around her. She became the notorious RBG. Right? She moved from being just like a normal left-wing Supreme Court justice to being this iconic figure because the idea was that she stood between the Democrats and doom. She stood between the Democrats and Armageddon. And here's the thing. This demonstrates full scale how the Democrats think of the Supreme Court, which is why, honestly, they should never be picking Supreme Court justices. So as we'll see, we're going to discuss a little bit later on the so-called McConnell doctrine from back in 2016, what he actually said. Was he saying that in the final year of a presidency, that the president should not select or that his selection should not be confirmed? No, he didn't say that. He never said that. What he said instead was that if the Senate was controlled by a different party than the president, the Senate had no obligation to move forward with a nomination if they were of a different party than the president until the American public had sounded off on what they wanted to be the final combination of factors leading to the selection of the Supreme Court justice. But in the final year of a presidency, we've had some 29 selections by presidents. It is perfectly normal for a president to select the person to fill a Supreme Court seat. In 17 of those cases, the president, in 17 of those cases, the president and Senate have been controlled by the same party. And in 15 of those 17 cases, that person has been confirmed. This is something Senator Ted Cruz pointed out over the weekend. This is, of course, exactly historically correct.
29 times there has been a vacancy in a presidential election year. Now, presidents have made nominations all 29 times. When the Senate has been of the same party of the president, a vacancy occurs in an election year, Of the 29 times, those are 19 of them. Of those 19, the Senate has confirmed those nominees 17 times. So if the parties are the same, the Senate confirms the nominee. When the parties are different, that's happened 10 times. Merrick Garland was one of them. Of those 10, the Senate has confirmed the nominees only twice.
Okay, it is very uncontroversial constitutionally speaking. The president gets to fill the seat, and then the Senate gets to decide whether they decide to go up or down on it. I thought that McConnell, you can go back and listen to my show at the time, I thought McConnell in 2016 was being too cute by half on the Merrick Garland thing by saying, well, you know, it's the last year of the presidency. We'll wait until the election is decided. To me, this is a very simple thing. You should not vote for any nominee who you feel is not going to interpret the Constitution properly. I don't care whether it is the first year of Barack Obama's term and he is selecting Sonia Sotomayor or Elena Kagan, or whether it is the last year of Barack Obama's term and he is selecting Merrick Garland. It makes no difference to me whatsoever in any way. The bottom line is this. The constitutional role of the Supreme Court is to interpret the Constitution properly. The Democrats have used the Supreme Court to enact policy from the bench for decades. Republicans have gone along with this out of some sense of nostalgia for a time when the Supreme Court was far less political. But the Democrats made this whole thing political way back in the 80s. This all started with Bork, and we've seen its culmination in the attempt to go after Justice Kavanaugh with false charges of gang rape and such, with ridiculous charges that he was involved in a boofing when he was 17 years old. The Democrats made this political. They've decided that the Supreme Court is merely another political tool in their arsenal. They have no institutional respect for the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is not something they care about. And this is something I talk about in my book, How to Destroy America in 3 Easy Steps. For Democrats, unfortunately, it has become the case that the institutions of the United States government are an obstacle to them. And when they are an obstacle, they seek to destroy the obstacle. This is why over the past several years since Trump was elected, they've talked about abolishing the Electoral College. They've talked about completely redoing the Senate or abolishing the Senate altogether. They're now talking about packing the Supreme Court. They were talking about that a year ago. Pete Buttigieg said openly in the middle of this race that he was willing to pack the Supreme Court. And this became a question on the debate stage as to whether people were going to pack the Supreme Court. Democrats have nothing but scorn for the institutional checks and balances of the government of the United States because they believe that those institutional checks and balances are an obstacle to complete rule from above. It has been true for a very long time. Now, even Ruth Bader Ginsburg was not opportunist enough to believe that packing the court was a good idea. Right? Ruth Bader Ginsburg, all the way back in 2016, I believe, was specifically asked about packing the court, and here is what she said at the time.
I have heard that there are some people on the Democratic side who would like to increase the number of judges. I think that was a bad idea when President Franklin Delano Roosevelt tried to pack the court. If anything would make the court appear partisan, it would be that. One side saying, when we're in power, we're going to enlarge the number of judges, so we will have more people who will vote the way we want them to.
Okay, so even Ruth Bader Ginsburg recognized the threat to the institutions. The old school liberals, however, are no longer in control of the Democratic Party. They don't believe in the institutions of the Constitution. They believe in overthrowing them. And honestly, this has a long legacy inside of the Democratic Party. Woodrow Wilson sought to overthrow the checks and balances of the Constitution by radically expanding the executive branch and overthrowing all checks and balances, taking all the powers of the legislature and placing them inside the executive. You saw FDR attempt to pack the court back in the 1930s. This led to the Supreme Court changing a lot of its doctrine in what was called the switch in time that saved 9, meaning that it saved 9 seats on the Supreme Court as opposed to 13 seats on the Supreme Court because FDR was threatening to pack the court. Institutions for the Democratic Party are of no interest. They don't like the structural constitution because they don't like the fundamental philosophy underlying the structural constitution, which is that of limited government and checks and balances that protect your rights. The Constitution was written for a very specific purpose. That purpose was to protect the principles of the Declaration of Independence. And the basic idea was that a government that is unitary in nature, a government that has unified power at the top and no checks and balances, either hierarchically with the states or horizontally between the branches, was going to infringe upon your rights. Democrats believe the government should infringe upon your rights because your rights come from government. And a government big enough to give you what you want is a government that is also big enough to take away what you have. Democrats have always seen these institutional checks and balances as a problem. So why in the world would you let Democrats appoint people to the Supreme Court who are promptly going to use the Supreme Court as another political body? The Supreme Court's original designation was to interpret the Constitution of the United States. Democrats don't like the Constitution of the United States and have appointed justices who similarly do not like the Constitution of the United States and see it as an obstacle to what they attempt to do. They see the Constitution as a bit of poetry that they can interpret however they see fit, from the Obamacare cases to Roe versus Wade Democratic justices never miss. They never miss because they are politically motivated. They do not bother reading the Constitution. The way that you can tell whether a justice reads the Constitution or does not read the Constitution is whether that justice always votes with your political priors or whether that justice sometimes votes against your political priors based on the text of a law before them. Democrats get what they want from their justices, no question, which is a good indicator as to how they see the court. And you have to understand all of this because that is what is undergirding the battle that we are currently undergoing. The battle that is about to break upon us is one that is honestly country-shattering in nature. And it's not because of anything Trump or the Republicans is about to do. As we're about to discuss, what Democrats are threatening to do, violate the structural integrity of the Constitution in massive new ways, violate every norm, break institutions of the Constitution. What they are threatening to do can, in fact, split the country apart. And they're using this as blackmail in order to prevent Republicans from fulfilling their constitutional duty to fill that seat and so that they can pack the court unofficially with another member of the hard left who will then rule in favor of all of their Democratic political strategies. In order to understand that, you have to understand how Democrats see the court. The Democrats do not see the court as an expositor of the Constitution. They see the court as a second legislature. This is why the worship for RBG. Conservatives, we really like Clarence Thomas. I'm a huge Clarence Thomas fan. We really like Justice Scalia a lot. But there was never the sort of worshipful insanity you see for Democrats and RBG. RBG was a near idol for many Democrats. In the same way that Democrats have a tendency to buy votive candles of Robert Mueller if he's going to stop Trump or something. They were worshipful toward RBG. Again, they were calling her the notorious RBG. She was an octogenarian liberal justice who spent her life in the law, and they were treating her as the notorious RBG because she was slaying queen. Because for the Democrats, when it comes to the Constitution is secondary, political priority is primary. Now wait, before you go, you have to know we are moving YouTube channels. Videos like this one will only be available on my personal YouTube channel, Ben Shapiro, starting September 28th. Click on the link in the description to subscribe so you don't miss a beat.